Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to figure out how to make this bass. It's kind of like a garage bass, so to speak, if I can compare it to anybody, which I don't like doing, but obviously this is what it reminded me of, is kind of like a bass from something that you hear from Sorrow. It's like a square with some bandpass modulation, and it's fairly simple to make, but it's a great way to get started on learning how to like dive in and kind of fill the gap or bridge the gap between making neural basses and then like making garage type stuff that still sounds good but doesn't have too much complicated harmonics going on, because not everybody likes that. So for the most part, this is a pretty straightforward bass in Serum. I'm going to turn all of these other things off so we can walk through the patch one by one, or like one step at a time. Yeah, this is definitely attainable in almost any other synth. It's just that Serum is a fantastic plugin to just get stuff super fast. And there's so many features that we don't talk about that I'll be covering in later videos, but for now, we can just kind of do some really cool stuff with some basic functions. So first up, I have a sub oscillator that has a direct output. Turn the level down a little bit. There's another sub oscillator, and then there is a square oscillator that has just a little bit of detuning. Most of the movement is coming from this bandpass 24. The cutoff is set all the way low, and there is some key tracking going on. And I think that it's being modulated by LFO2. Let me see. Yeah. So like in the LFO thing, if you don't know already, then you can like double click anywhere, and then you can drag points from that. I don't know why it's doing that. Boom, boom, which is kind of cool. Whoa, 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 right? But for now, we'll kind of just, it's pretty straightforward with that whole thing, and kind of mess with this LFO. You can also go into this folder and then do different kinds of LFO shapes if you don't really just like the standard wub. But for me, this was a pretty easy shape, and I like the way that that sounds. Okay, onto the effects tabs. We have just a little bit of hyper dimension going on. There's no dimension expander happening. The mix is just being turned down just a little bit, and I think that I turned the detuning down as well. Maybe the rate, I don't remember. But yeah, you can just copy the settings. Here's the distortion tab, tube, with 62% drive. Generally, I do like a half-half mix, or like a New York style mix, but it's fine. This, like I said, this is just what I did when I made this bass. It wasn't like intended. It's just what came out. The phaser is pretty cool. On the frequency tab, there is an LFO1 that's modulating this, and it gives it just a slight characteristic that is subtle but kind of nice. So you can't really hear it that much, but when you play that along with the detuning, then like I said, you get some pretty nice results. Next up, we have some chorus that just gives it a little bit of stereo. Again, you can copy these settings with low mix, low rate. I think I turned the feedback up just a little bit, but that's about it. And then finally, we have some reverb that isn't really doing a whole lot. It's not set on a plate. The size is up 35% with a little bit of decay, but literally this is just kind of to take some of the tail out and to make the bass a little bit more wet. This patch shouldn't be too difficult to recreate. Let me see. The only other thing is that there's some attack on here and then a little bit of release. I think that I went over all the tabs, so this should be pretty easy for you guys to make. If this is all you have, like let's say like you're doing this in FL Studio or Cubase or Pro Tools or whatever, then you should at least be able to achieve. So everything after this, some things that will make it sound a little bit better, but for me this is like the key core of the sound, or like the tone, you know. So after that, we have a little bit of saturation on a soft sine. Drive is up a little bit, output is just turned down ever so slightly. This is going to make it a little bit louder. Saturator is good if you do it the right way. 9 times out of 10 I use a soft sine, but it's not necessarily required. Erosion is an optional thing. This will give it a little bit more high end. Maybe a little bit more. So yeah, that's not necessarily required, but you can get a little bit of fuzz with the erosion. We can kind of shape that and tone this with the auto filter. Now this is pretty cool, because if you're playing something and you just want to keep it in sub, you can turn the resonance down and then go here, and now you just have a subtone. And then you can mess with the filter and then you can do automation with that. You can even set this to an LFO to kind of sync up. I don't know if this will sync up exactly, but it should be on a 1/4. Oh, that sounds awesome. Oh, dude, that sounds more like neuro stuff. That's freaking sick. Cool. Yeah, sometimes you get cool tones like that. So this would be the next step for me, because I mean, that tone sounds pretty awesome already. So this will help bring out some of those highs and make the bass and the mid-range and the highs sound a little bit more clear. Cool. Yeah, I like that. And then of course, if you don't like it, you can just turn off the auto filter. And then of course, if you don't like that, you can just turn off the erosion for a cleaner sound. So you have options within these. The last thing that I did is I set a utility on here just to make the bass mono, which is like 160 hertz. This is to help prevent phasing issues and keep my sub in mono, while all of the higher end stuff can kind of float around freely. Having a consistent sub is pretty important when you make basses, and you know, there's so many different ways to make this. It's pretty typical for some people to make mid-range basses and then take the sub out and just use like a regular sub or a clean sub under. But for me, I like to preserve the characteristics of how the sub frequencies react to the filters that I set up. I mean, in essence, this is really just a square bass with a little bit of sub under that's being modulated by a bandpass. But sometimes, like when you tweak the parameters and you set them up in such a particular way, you can achieve like really neat results. Like I wasn't expecting this to happen. That was kind of just a spur of the moment, but that's actually something that I like. So I might resample that and then distort that some more and then try to see if I can continue to recreate, you know, more tones with it. But that's the beauty of this kind of process, is just knowing your tools, which I mention all the time, to create really cool sounds out of your typical bass. But yeah, I hope that was informative to you guys. This wasn't meant to be like a mind-blowing how to bass, but just a simple thing that you can kind of follow along and, you know, maybe do something different. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you guys have any suggestions of stuff that you want me to make in the future, then let me know. Hopefully this was enjoyable to you, and I will catch you later. Happy producing.